Welcome to day 2 of Gold Standard University Live. We're going to alter the schedule a bit from what was on the printed schedule. The professor is going to lead with the first half and give his talk, and then again the 15-minute question and answer period later. And again, because there's a problem with clarity and hearing, and people want to know the discussion topic. So if you have a question and you're called upon, please stand and state it as clearly as possible. And we may have to repeat it so we have a clarity, and I think it'll add to the process, and then the professor will give the answer. All right, and that's what we'll do. And so that's for the first session. The second one, half of today, I'm going to move up the talk, half of my talk. On the silver as being the silver basis is perhaps an early warning sign, and Tom Zabel will join me in the question and answer period on that topic itself. This afternoon, the early period this afternoon, we're going to have something that we hadn't intended. I mean, this is, as I told Martha last night, this is happening in real time as time is running out. And we're all there at the edge. Things are shifting on us as we speak, and we're lucky enough to have Braun and Nathan here with us. Nathan is an investment in the investment business, and he's, as we call him, old friend of the Feketistas. Back in Hungary when this thing all started. And Nathan's been a supporter and a constant participant in this process, and we're very pleased to have Nathan with us. And Braun from Perth Mint is going to give us how he sees it going on, which is, I mean, we all have questions about this regarding supplies of gold and silver. So that's going to be the Braun and Nathan show is for the early part of the afternoon, and the second 45-minute period I'm going to wrap it up, not so much on the basis, but on why I think this we are in the situation that we're in, where the basis is so critically important, because it does deal with the end game. And I believe that in that 45-minute talk, I'm going to give where the genesis of the end game began and why we're all here. Anyway, Professor, welcome.
Nathan Rousses has some very up-to-date information which I thought you would like to listen to, so he's going to share it with us about 2-3 minutes.
Yes, I'll be very, very brief. Thank you for your indulgence, ladies and gentlemen. This was it just came to my attention last night, but in this group of rare lifelong learners, it's probably I'm probably not the first one to have found out about this. There is someone who has taken the eBay data of the actual trades that have been going on for physical gold and silver, and I'll just briefly give you an update on what happened yesterday on eBay. Now, I think the person that designed this, I'm loath to criticize him because I don't possess the technological skill to do something like this, but they must have been a very, very excitable gold bug, because they didn't give me enough data to give you the true answers of how extreme the premiums have got. But I will give you what I can be certain of by being conservative. 1 ounce gold Krugerrand, 29 traded hands yesterday. The lowest premium over spot was 8.27%, and they were using spot as $749 US gold. The 1 ounce gold Eagle, 20 of them traded hands. The lowest premium at which they traded hands over spot was 13.6%. And the gold sovereigns, which I believe, someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they contain just under a 1/4 ounce of gold. The premium on those, the lowest premium at which one of the 37 sovereigns that traded yesterday on eBay changed hands was just under 15%. Moving over to silver, there were 354 silver Eagle 1 ounce coins that traded hands, and the minimum premium that was paid was 22%.
Wow.
There were 1 ounce silver bullion coins, 89 that traded hands yesterday, and the minimum was 3% premium over spot. However, when I say the way this fellow presented the information makes it difficult to determine it, the highest was at more than twice spot, and I have no idea where the average is in that. Actually, it was with all these products, the highest was at a multiple of spot, and there's no way of knowing whether it was just some brand new gold bug that was terrified out of his wits and buying everything he could get his hands on, or whether that was closer to what the average traded at. But
let's go sell on eBay.
And finally, the last transaction I wrote down was the 20 ounce groups of silver Eagles. 16 traded hands, and the minimum premium was 64%. Now, this is the website for those of you who are interested. And once again, those were trades, November 11th trades on eBay, presumably U.S. time, I would guess. Thank you.
Rudy?
Just to let you all know, I bought silver from Sprott Money last week, just before I left on this trip. $20 an ounce Canadian. So that's 100%. That's the difference in the Canadian dollar, the premium.
You're the big gold bug. Silver.
All right. My topic this morning is the difference between the basis for grains and the basis for monetary metals. Yesterday, in my introductory talk, I talked about the concept of the basis as a tool of warehousing. So let me just very briefly recall the highlights of that talk. The basis can be thought of as a proxy for the cost of warehousing. Certainly that's true for the grains. The elevator operator calculates his carrying charge, and he can recapture that by entering the future markets, and he's hedging his position in the elevator by selling an equivalent amount of grain futures. Then Tom was also talking about the basis, and he was describing the various limits which apply. The basis has an upper limit, and when we have a condition of contango, it means the futures price is at a premium as compared with the cash price, but that difference between the two prices cannot be arbitrarily large, and the reason for that is that it cannot be larger than the carrying charge. The carrying charge involves all costs involved in carrying the grain, and of course the major cost is the cost of warehousing space, but also the rate of interest and other factors, could be local factors, enter this. So if the premium over the cash price is larger than all the added up carrying costs, then there is a possibility of riskless, or risk-free, I think this is a better English, risk-free arbitrage, because people could buy the cash and sell the futures. And since the cost of his carrying the cash commodity is lower than the premium he can capture through selling the future, there is a margin of profit, and this is riskless because he has locked it in already, so he doesn't have to wait for anything. He just marks his time, and when the futures contract expires, he just delivers the grain. So because of this risk-free profit, which is available to everybody, any excess over that carrying charge will disappear, because sharp-eyed operators will immediately take advantage of it, and as they do, that premium, that excess over the carrying charge will be killed. So this effectively sets an upper limit for the basis. Now, the question arises, is there a lower limit to the basis? Well, we know the basis can be negative, that's backwardation, and it's a very critical thing which has to be carefully analyzed. But the question is, how low can the basis go in the negative territory? Once the basis becomes negative, sure, we have backwardation, but how big the backwardation can be. And here's the surprise, at least I found in various occasions when I talked to people about this, that there is no limit. There are circumstances when the basis can go to any negative level. What this means, of course, if you translate it into the language of shortages or excess surpluses, is that the shortage of the cash commodity could be arbitrarily large in comparison with the demand. You see, a famine situation would create a shortage of grain, and if you have to think of extreme situations such as, for instance, a city under enemy siege, and there is no way to get food into the city under.
Iceland.
That's terrible.
And under these circumstances, the cash price could reach any high level because people will be prepared to pay for food. They don't want to starve or die of starvation. And of course, the other situation which we are most interested in is concerns the monetary metals, gold and silver. When people get scared that the monetary system may just collapse or the banks can fail, and in any case they can't get to their bank deposits, then gold and silver can go to any high price level, and therefore, if you think in terms of the basis can go to any negative level. This is the very heart of our little investigation, because it means that there is a basis risk, which means that when you have a hedged position, you have the cash and you have sold the future, there is a risk, but this risk concerns those who have a short leg. So this is the starting point of our investigation, that there is a basis risk. Now, it's interesting to compare the basis risk with price risk. A price risk, in assessing the price risk, you ask the question, what are the extremes which the price can reach? And obviously there is a lower limit. The price cannot fall below zero. It's always positive. However, there is no limit on the upper end, and that the examples we have just discussed would be applicable in this situation too. So the price risk is also there. It's very important, and what hedging means, what those who are trading the future markets and are watching the basis, is simply replacing the price risk with basis risk. So there is a cost for hedging, and that this is you cover one risk, but you face another. However, and that's the point, and this is the important thing for us to understand, The hedgers, those people who are trying to manage their risks, they bear the basis risk gladly, because this is something they can manage or they can influence, whereas the price risk depends on factors which are outside of human control. Could be the weather, could be natural disasters such as earthquake or tornado or what have you, but by and large it's outside of our control, whereas the basis risk is something one can influence, certainly more than the price risk, but also the basis risk is far more predictable. To the extent we can't manage it, we can at least make approximate predictions how it will behave. And this is something I have already started explaining yesterday morning, when I described that for grains the basis has a definite cyclical pattern, with the crop year providing the cycle, which after the crop year is over is going to repeat itself. This is not carved into stone, but it certainly gives you a very useful guideline what to expect. There will be deviations. It could be that the crop year is a little longer, a couple of weeks, or shorter, depending on the conditions, how the crop is maturing and being harvested, or natural disasters, crop failure, or even bumper crop. They will change the pattern marginally, but by and large this is the overwhelming feature of the annual cycle, the crop cycle, which keeps repeating. And here I called your attention already to the first very important difference between the basis for grains on the one hand and the behavior of the basis for monetary metals on the other. For monetary metals, the basis does not behave cyclically, because there's no such thing as a crop. Gold mining is a continuous occupation. It goes year round, and there is no cyclicity to it. However, there's something which is probably just as important, which replaces the crop cycle for the grains. There's something for the monetary metals which helps you to predict its behavior, at least in the long run, and this is the effect of erosion. It means that whenever futures trading started for the monetary metals, we put the date between 1960 and 1970. That's when it started. Before that, there was certainly no gold futures trading. Actually, I thought about this in the meantime. Yesterday we said that 1965 or thereabouts was the year. But you see
COMEX, yeah.
COMEX.
Yeah.
But I can't answer this. But the question did arise to me is that the silver price itself was variable before that. In fact, the silver was demonetized on a large scale at the end of the 19th century, in the 1870s, if you want to put a date on it, say 1873. Two big important countries were instrumental. The United States on the one hand, which just came out victorious of the Civil War upheaval, and Germany, which came out victorious from the Franco-Prussian War. And as part of their victory parade, they decided that they wanted to chuck silver. They didn't need. The prestigious thing was to have a gold standard. So both Germany and the United States moved in that direction to demonetize silver and put the monetary system on what they called gold monometallism. Bimetallism was out, monometallism was in. And as a consequence of this, they were dumping silver on the world market because they had silver in their coinage, and that was one thing. The other thing is they closed their mints to silver, both Germany and the United States, and of course a lot of less important countries following suit. And so the monetary demand for silver almost completely disappeared. China was an important exception, which never fell for that monetary trick, which it basically was. The demonetization of silver, because it's not up to governments to decide what money is. It's up to the people, and the people may not accept it. But in some cases of these scare tactics, which Germany and the United States applied, had a result in the world market for silver, and it was a dramatic decline in the silver price from the statutory price of $1.29 US. It started falling, and it took a long time. And there were ups and downs. In fact, during World War I, silver made a comeback kid. Monetary metal came back and reached that statutory price. Didn't last very long, and then it started declining again. And the trough was reached in, I think, 1932, when silver was quoted at 25 cents an ounce, so that's less than 20% of the previous monetary price. So you see, this raised the question in me, and I don't have the answer, and I'm wondering if you could perhaps enlighten us. Was there, before COMEX trading in gold, was there perhaps another futures market trading silver before 1965? Because the fact of the variable silver price could have invited such a trading, but I'm not aware if there was an organized futures market.
You got nothing for. Was there anything in Canada that
No,
you recall?
no.
It wasn't okay. Yeah, the only thing I can think of that would approach a futures market would be the London Ford market, LBMA. But it's not a typical futures contract. But I presume they would have had Ford contracts at that point.
And would the basis show up somehow in this forward market? Well,
I think it should if they're quoting prices.
Yeah,
I just
that's
don't know.
right.
I've never seen prices go back that far.
Well, anyhow, those who want to study monetary economics and looking for a good topic for a PhD thesis, please help yourself. I don't think you will have much competition, but I guarantee you it's a very interesting question. All right. So, what I'm talking about is the difference between grains and monetary metals as far as the basis is concerned. So let's just assume that we became interested in this problem in 1960 or 65 and watched what happened to the bases during this period of time, embracing some 40, 50 years, half a century, which is long enough to make some conclusions. The striking feature of the behavior of the basis for monetary metals is the erosion. It started from a contango, which reflects, as we know by now, the cost of warehousing and other carrying charges. So from this maximum, we know it's a maximum. It cannot be higher than that. So from that height, the basis both for gold and silver started eroding and falling very gently, but with ups and downs, and it's still continuing. And if you add to this fact, that's a historical fact, but we add our scientific insight that we are approaching an end game of the international monetary system. Presently, the international monetary system is purely debt-based. It's purely an irredeemable currency. Historically, there has never been a successful system based on irredeemable currency. People will get wise to it. It's a natural process. There's nothing the governments or central banks can do about it. They may, by hook or crook, postpone the evil day when the scheme will collapse, but this is inevitable. At least we think so. Of course, the economists who are in the pay of government or central banks would dispute this. They would say, no, we have learned all kinds of tricks in the meantime. We had Keynes, and we had Friedman, and we had others, and by now we know how to manage it. And actually Friedman does go on record, and he says that he just could not imagine a situation that with our present setup of central banks, Federal Reserve, and international cooperation between various central banks, that it could happen. In other words, German-type hyperinflation, but there were, in practically every country there was one, even in the United States after the American Revolution, the continental currency collapsed. In France, during the French Revolution, there was the Assignat disaster and the Mandat disaster. But the point is that if you have a balanced view and you have some scientific standards, you just cannot make a conclusion that our monetary system based on that will survive indefinitely. So it's coming to an end, some kind of an end. We may not be very clear in our minds what kind of end it will be, but if it comes, as it will, then it will mean further erosion of the basis, because it will show up in the scarcity of the monetary metals. In fact, monetary metals will simply not be offered for sale, not even by the gold mines and the silver mines. And therefore, this erosion of the basis is going to continue, And at one point, when backwardation becomes permanent, it may even be a dramatic drop in the basis, meaning that no monetary metal will be offered for sale against paper currency. So this is what replaces the annual cycle for the basis for grains when you study the monetary metals. It's this erosion which ends in a rather revolutionary upheaval, the collapse of the basis. I recall what we already talked about, that there is no lower limit to the basis. Backwardation can go to any depth. It's a bottomless pit where the basis could fall in. So this is the basic difference. But there are other differences, and I would like to spend the rest of my time, which is another 20 minutes, or what is it?
10, but we'll
Only
be 20.
10 or 15 minutes, yeah.
Oh,
I'm not going to cut you off.
because this is something new, something which I didn't foresee, and I don't know about others. Perhaps they have to make a confession like I did. But there was something which I thought that made monetary metals, the basis for monetary metals, different from the basis for grains. And looking at the same question now, I must admit that I was wrong, because the very latest developments, including what Nathan just told us a few minutes ago, show that actually this difference was more imaginary than real. So what is this difference? Well, here is a textbook on grain merchandising, and the very definition of the basis in that book, this is written not for theoreticians, it's written for those who are actually making a living in trading grains, buying and selling grains, not following the price movements, but following the basis movements. In other words, if you offer to sell them grain, their question is not at what price, but at what basis. And if you want to buy grain from them, they will quote you not a price, but a basis, because they assume that you are trading grains based on the basis and not on the price. Because this was my very initial remark, that the cost of that the capital of the grain trading industry, which is tied up in building elevators, is just too vulnerable to price movements. If a small change takes place in the grain price, it could wipe out your whole capital. So as a consequence, if you are trading grains, you have to hedge. If you buy, you make a compensating trade in the futures market of selling, and if you sell, then you have to lift your short position, corresponding short position in the futures market. So this is the first observation when it comes to the basis. It's absolutely necessary for people engaged in this. So let me just read this, it's just a short sentence, how the basis is defined in this textbook, which is an authoritative textbook written by practitioners to other practitioners who are novices to this. Historically, it's true that in the beginning all grain trading was guided by the price, but as time went on, less and less trading was motivated by price changes and more, and by now I think it's far more than 50% of all grain trade is using the basis as its guiding star, not the price but the basis. So here is this sentence, definition of basis as far as grain trading is concerned. Basis is the difference between the local cash price and the future price. So how does it differ from our definition? Well, we never talked about local cash price for silver and gold. We talked about the world price of silver and gold, the world cash price, as opposed to the future price, which you could use COMEX quotation or TOCOM, the Japanese quotation. So this is a very dramatic difference. You see, the explanation is obvious. Local factors are playing a very important role in the grain trade, because once you build a grain elevator, then you are tied to that location. Once you started farming and growing grain, your farm is tied to a location. So basis is a personal thing, so to speak, for the farmer or for the grain elevator operator, because he cannot uproot his farm or his elevator from one location and put it to a different location. He's tied to that locality where he's operating. So he has a certain basis, and another farmer or another grain elevator operator 500 miles away will have a different one, because the local conditions are entirely different. It could be less grain farming, or it could be more fertile land or whatever, but it will be different. Cannot take it for granted that there is a universal basis at any one time valid for the whole country or for the whole world. And this is very important. Now, what I thought, and I suppose most of my colleagues thought before this big crisis, monetary and economic crisis of the year 2008, we thought that definitely monetary metals, gold and silver, were different because they were far more portable. Gold and silver are portable if you don't have a good market in a small locality. You can always go to New York or just rent warehouse space in New York and hold your gold there and do the trading from a distance or whatever. So because of the greater portability, physical portability of gold and silver, the gold and silver bases will behave quite differently from the grain basis, because the grain is tied to the locality where the operators are, and precious metals are not tied. So that was our assumption. And lo and behold, what happened? This crisis put a huge premium. What was the highest premium we heard?
64%.
I mean, if you told people a year ago that this could happen, they would have laughed you out of the room. This is ridiculous. Because coins, silver, gold are so portable. Whenever such a premium, the world supply will be moved to that locality. And now we see big differences in the premiums, and that's, by the way, that's obviously a big difference in the basis. Don't lose sight of the basis. Here we are quoting premiums, but that can be translated in the basis. And theoretically, it's the language of the basis you want to use. So what is going on? Well, what is going on is that the basis for the monetary metals is not all that different from the basis of the grains, because it's tied to local. When trouble comes, now normally in calm waters, in calm weather, the portability of the monetary metals will assert themselves, and gold and silver will flow to wherever it commands the highest price. And as it does move, gold and silver, the premium will be wiped out. But should trouble start, all bets are off, and then you have to see that the basis is a local phenomenon. So, is it my time now?
Yes.
Okay, I just add a couple of sentences. We have to return to this because this is very, very important. But it means that you have your own basis, I have mine, Tom has his, and depending wherever you live and how good a relationship you have with the local coin shop, etc., etc., etc. And please don't believe that somebody else can tell you what your basis is. You just have to do your own homework and use a spreadsheet and enter the daily ask bid prices locally, and then read the London fix or the COMEX price or the TOCOM, whichever is closer to whichever market is closer to you, and then you have your basis. Now, I don't want to ruin your business.
Now that he
because-
has. He didn't want to. There's no intent, Tom.
You're towing the line.
He was listening closely, though.
But I thought you are selling your information, your basis charts and things like that.
Yeah, but it's as a tool, not as a not as the end.
Okay.
For someone to use in their own.
Well, we are on the same wavelength. There's no problem. But I just wanted to avoid even the shadow of the doubt that I'm on, because it's good to watch the charts. Whoever charts the gold and silver basis on a more global basis. But this will not supplant your need to calculate your own and carry on the chart. As I will explain it in a future talk, a further talk during this conference, what is important for you is not so much the absolute value of the basis, but the change of the basis. And that is what is giving you the signals. Any violent change in your local basis, which you calculate for yourself, will give you the signals. So with this I close and open the floor for questions.
I just want to remark that it shows that we're really in sync. He's 1 minute off. Our 45-minute, we may have started a minute later, and probably did. So we're doing quite well, yes. David.
Professor, you're talking about the flow of metals as a way of evening out the basis. And with reference to the eBay, isn't it just a matter of time before the mints sort of wake up? A mint somewhere will all of a sudden wake up and say, okay, well, the best prices are on eBay, so maybe we should be offering our coins on eBay rather than over the counter.
Okay. the data that Nathan came up with this morning about the premiums on eBay, which is internet-based, it's not a local coin dealer, you know, it's not Kitco, it's some guy out with his stash of coins selling his coins to somebody else who wants to buy those coins, and we're seeing a remarkable premium here. I think Dave was asking the question, there's obviously a natural arbitrage where you see this huge difference in prices, and he said, in a way, this is sort of the Reagan thing, won't the market take care of that arbitrage? Won't someday the Perth Mint wake up and see the difference in the premiums and decide to sell directly into it rather than, you know, supplying their coin dealers, and maybe even out the flow that way. Is that right, Dave?
Well, this is possible, but sure, eBay is not a local market, but it's a rather limited market, as opposed to what we used to have only a few months ago, when the market was absolutely global, and the slightest deviation ignited arbitrage, and you could take it for granted that these deviations will be wiped out in practically no time, and now it's no longer happening. Because the whole system became sticky. That's my view. I mean, this phenomenon is so new, so recent, that it will take a much more careful analysis than we can provide here.
The point I'm trying to make is that, like, if the Mint doesn't do it, then some smart individual is going to be lining up at the Perth Mint, sticking in his order, going on the queue. It might take, you know, 2 months to fulfill the order, and then he's just going to be selling into eBay. He's going to have constant orders in the Perth Mint there, and he's going to be doing it if the Mints are not doing it.
I think Braun's going to announce that this afternoon he has a bus. There's a tour bus scheduled, and you go with him to the Perth Mint. There's a side door, and we tell Braun before what we want. You know, Braun.
Just in response to that. The shop manager of our retail shop told me that there was a guy who was actually buying, and this was, you know, 3 months, 4 months ago, before we really saw these sorts of premiums, that he was bought 5,000 1-ounce Kookaburra silver coins. And she said, why are you buying so much? He's selling them on eBay. Now, what's interesting to me is that someone would buy them from eBay and not think within Australia to go, oh, look in the yellow pages, or I'll call a coin dealer, or I'll ring the Perth Mint. And he then bought another lot of 5,000. Now, I don't know if he's had any such luck, because we have had this excess demand, and, you know, I don't think we'll be able to buy those sort of quantities going forward. So that has happened. Someone is trying to arbitrage that.
Right, and they're dealers. They're coin dealers on eBay. Look at who's selling in volume. Today it isn't the little guys. It's, you know, if you know what there is, it's usually the dealers.
Lawrence?
Actually,
Could you stand up, Lawrence?
yeah, pardon me. Actually, eBay, in my experience, is in fact a local market on the national level. If you try here in Australia to buy silver or gold in the United States through eBay, they won't ship it here. In fact, it's difficult to get it shipped from Perth. Okay, and if I want to go get my allocated silver in Perth, because you won't provide insurance on shipping, okay, I have to fly to Perth, rent a car, and drive it back to Brisbane. So that's another factor in the basis is transport costs. You mentioned it was a factor in grain basis, but it's a factor in bullion basis too.
Sure. Ease, it really is. Yes?
Is there a basis that takes account, I guess, also fabrication, converting large bars to small bars for the retail market? Is there a role for basis in analysing that?
I guess he's asking a question that and this is something I think Braun would answer, because he's from Perth Mint. And correct me if I'm wrong. Your question is there a way of calculating the basis in the processing process itself in terms of cost? Is that what it is? Is that applicable? What do you think, John?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that question, because while the professor was talking, I was sort of thinking that the premiums are in a way a basis. I mean, the professor's thing is that I'm going in the grain business is I'm going to invest some capital, some fixed dollars to build an elevator, and I want to make money. My business is storage, not, you know, speculating on the grain price. So that is why you would buy spot, sell futures, and you want to make sure that that gap is enough to cover the cost, and you want to make sure that elevator is full during each season so you can make your return. And in some sense, in a similar way, the coin premium is the basis of which in a manufacturing business where you're spending capital to set up some machines to mint coins and you don't care, and indeed I can tell you the Perth does not want to be exposed to the metal price, and it has mechanisms which I can talk about later in the afternoon how we deal. We don't deal in futures, we use the leasing market. But same thing, we're not interested in where the price goes, we just want to make sure it's the premium above spot that we get which pays for that capital investment to manufacture it. And in some sense, so you're right, the premium is a manufacturing basis, just as I suppose the basis is a storage basis. So there's it's a similar concept, yeah.
Bron is beginning to realize that he actually works for a gold and silver elevator company. Are there any other questions?
I would like to add the thought that the whole character of trading changes if delivery times are extended from the usual 48 hour or at most 72 hours delivery times, because this will make trading so sticky that the two patterns cannot be compared any longer. Just think of yourself that you order a quantity of gold or silver and you are told that we take your order but delivery time is 6 months. Most people would step back and say, no thank you, I'm not taking this trade, because you cannot tie up your capital for such a long time without knowing what happens in the meantime. This is just too much risk to take, and therefore you can't just factor that delivery time into the trading pattern. It just won't work that way. So whatever you can say that eBay is local but national, and I intend to, I do agree with that. But the fact is that it's the problem is really the lengthening of the delivery time, which changes the whole character of the trading.
Well, and adding to that, I don't know if maybe someone here has the specifics, but recently there's been some chatter on the internet that someone took delivery of so much tons of gold wholesale and they paid like 30% premium to the spot price. Does anyone here know what the particulars of that transaction was?
It's Canadian.
Was it okay?
No, not really, because even up to today, the premiums in Dubai is about $1 an ounce.
But yeah, well, but this particular chatter, I don't know if it's true or whatever, but I think it would play into the same thing that we're talking about. That you know, at a one particular place at time, 30 tons of gold or whatever it was may be worth more than it is on the spot price that you get on Kitco or whatever, and that's not a form of basis that we, I've certainly looked at before, and I think you've said, it was a very recent revelation. But I think you start seeing more and more of that as you have a demand increase and the supply start to drop. At this basis that I think I referred to it yesterday too, sort of, now you have all these different types of bases you could start really looking at, whereas before really it didn't make sense to look at anything other than just the Kitco spot price and the futures price, because everything else was in that same range, and it wasn't driving toward any particular trend of increasing or decreasing.
Yep. Could you stand up?
Is that just because they could get 30 tons within 2 days or something? So
I mean, make your own assumption, but I think, it was probably the delivery window and the tonnage and how quickly it could be delivered and perhaps the quality. I mean, it could be any number of things. But the fact that someone specifically is that being that specific and is willing to pay that much more to get that in that format in one place is not something I've heard of if it's true, but even if it isn't, I would presume that it will be true at some point in the near future. People will be doing those kind of transactions.
On the local prices, I don't know how to do it because I get gold through Australian Bullion Company in Sydney, and if you watch the prices there, their buy-sell spreads change dramatically. From one day it could be 3%, they'll have an 8% or even 10% spread. The odd thing is that sometimes the price of gold will drop, and yet their spread changes, so they are actually willing to buy it back. at a higher price than they were the day before. So it's very confusing trying to work out what a basis or anything like that would be using your local prices.
Could I answer that?
Yes, Judy.
Mainly, I think.
Judy, could you stand up? Okay.
Mainly, I think in Australia, some of the bullion and corn dealers buy direct from the public. So you can sell them back to ABC, and if they have an inflow, they could sell it to you cheap. The spread would be slightly cheaper. Same with another company called Ainsley. I don't know why, but they got hoods of Coonabarra, and they can sell it much cheaper than Perth meat.
All right, good. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Professor, I just wanted to ask why, if the backwardation goes into permanent, why the mines would actually stop selling. I mean, aren't they still going to need cash just to keep their operation going? I can't quite.
It's the other way around. When contango goes into backwardation, then the mines may at one point decide to stop or at least decrease.
What I'm saying is, why would they do that? Don't they require cash just to keep mining? How are they going to pay their employees in gold instead? Or like,
well,
Yes, possibly. I mean, at the end game of gold standard, I mean, that's what you'd be paying in, right? So if you're a gold miner, this is actually an interesting question. You're a gold miner, you're mining gold, and the same thing that you're mining, you pay. Well, obviously you would refine it, but that, you know, as a process, that's